They brought the bulldozer for my family's bridge just after sunrise on a Tuesday. From my back porch, I watched 80 years of stone and timber, laid by my grandfather Henry Hank Ward, explode into Willowbend Creek while a tidy little crowd from Silver Ridge Estates stood on the bank, phones out, some of them laughing. At the front was Marla Kensington, president of the Silver Ridge Homeowners Association, real estate queen and professional bully, directing the operator like she was filming a commercial instead of erasing a man's legacy. What she didn't know was simple. I own Copper Run Road, the only alternate way in and out of that subdivision. While my bridge fell, I was already realizing something important. She thought she'd removed my leverage. She'd actually woken it up. My name is Ethan Ward, third-generation civil engineer, living on 127 acres outside Richmond, Virginia. My family bought this land in 1940 when it was scrub and creek bottom. Hank built everything himself, including that stone and timber bridge over Willowbend Creek that tied our place into Copper Run Road and 4 surrounding farms. I learned to fish under it, learned to drive over it, listening to my father repeat Hank's line, "Build it right, and it'll outlast you." 2 years ago, I buried my wife. My daughter moved across the country, and that bridge became the last solid thing tying me to the men who raised me. So when a developer carved Silver Ridge Estates into the Old Monroe farm and needed a sewage easement across my land, I negotiated $12,000, signed the easement, and figured that was the start and end of our relationship. Then Marla Kensington moved in. 60-something, sharp blonde bob, initials on her BMW, elected HOA president 3 months after arrival, and suddenly my creek, my woods, my bridge became visual issues in her world. One April afternoon, she walked onto my porch with a certified letter and a teacher's smile. The letter demanded I remove a deteriorating, unsafe bridge structure within 30 days based on an environmental study from the HOA. I read it twice and told her, calmly, that the bridge sat entirely on my land and the Silver Ridge Homeowners Association had as much authority over it as I had over her kitchen. She tapped the envelope, said they had documents showing it was abandoned county infrastructure, and that it would be simpler for everyone if I cooperated. This study was 4 pages from a landscaping company, no engineer's stamp anywhere. I said so. Her smile thinned. "We'll proceed through proper channels," she said, and left like the decision had already been made. A week later, at 6:04 a.m., those proper channels showed up in yellow steel, chewing through Hank's work while Marla Kensington filmed it like a ribbon cutting. By the time the deputy arrived, the span was rubble choking Willowbend Creek. He took a report and called it a civil matter. Marla handed him a neat folder and said they'd removed a hazard and probably saved the county a lawsuit. Standing there on my own land in boots and boxer shorts, covered in dust from my grandfather's stones, I realized exactly what I was to her, an obstacle to bulldoze. Walking back up the hill, I decided if she wanted to play with property lines, I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. I was going to be the guy who actually reads every deed. The next morning, I was in a diner with Daniel Cortez, an old friend turned land use lawyer. He scrolled through the photos, whistled, and said it was the cleanest case of property destruction he'd seen in 20 years. We filed for an emergency injunction and sued the Silver Ridge Homeowners Association for $78,000 in damages. The county inspector confirmed what we already knew. The bridge was fully permitted, entirely on my parcel, and Marla Kensington hadn't pulled a single permit to touch it. Her answer was to hire a marble lobby firm from Richmond, Virginia, and countersue, claiming the bridge had become public by adverse possession. Daniel Cortez laughed when he saw it. 3 decades of receipts, photos of private property, signs, and tax records blew that argument to pieces, and the judge dismissed it in 3 weeks. Instead of backing down, Marla Kensington tried to buy a headline. A paralegal dropped off an offer. I dropped my suit. They dropped theirs, and the HOA would donate $5,000 to a veterans fund in Henry Hank Ward's honor. I told Daniel Cortez my grandfather's name wasn't for sale. That's when the quiet attack started. Inside the Silver Ridge Estates Facebook group, I became the unstable landowner blocking safety improvements, the widower clinging to junk. They joked about me running outside in my underwear, speculated about my mental health, warned each other their property values were at risk because of one stubborn man. Screenshots leaked out through friends. Logan Pierce, my oldest buddy, called and asked if I'd respond online. I watched storm clouds stack over Willowbend Creek and told him no. I wasn't interested in winning Facebook comments. I was interested in winning for real. So I went back to the blueprints, the legal ones. I pulled out my old Rolodex and started dialing people who'd worked in the county longer than Silver Ridge Estates had existed. That's how I ended up talking to Sandra Sue in county planning. Quietly, she told me Marla Kensington's pet projects, clubhouse, tennis courts, flashy entrances, were zipping through reviews, all fast-tracked by Commissioner Blake Harrow, who also co-owned a Florida condo with her, something you could see right in the records. I spent 3 days in the clerk's office with Janice Miller hauling out dusty boxes while I built a spreadsheet of every permit, easement, and variance tied to Silver Ridge Estates. Buried in those files was the crack I needed. The private sewage plant serving all 85 homes was running on a conditional permit from the State Department of Environmental Quality that had expired more than a year earlier, extended twice on paper by letters signed by Commissioner Blake Harrow, with no proof the required upgrades were done. I called Dr. Rachel Lynn, my former intern, now an environmental engineer, and walked her through what I'd found. She told me if I filed a formal complaint, the state would be forced to inspect within 60 days. If the system failed, Silver Ridge Estates would be trucking sewage out at about $400 a house per month. I might have hesitated, but the next move arrived by certified mail. 3 code citations in one day. Suddenly, my father's old pickup was a junk vehicle, my brush pile a burn hazard, my no trespassing signs 2 inches too tall. When I called the young code officer, Evan Brooks, he admitted he'd been told to drive past my place every day and document anything. That afternoon, I filled out Dr. Rachel Lynn's complaint, attached the expired permit and Commissioner Blake Harrow's letters, and dropped it in the mail. The citations kept coming. I photographed every one. The real turning point arrived in the form of Mark Ellison, treasurer of the Silver Ridge Homeowners Association, standing on my porch with a laptop and a guilty conscience. At my kitchen table, he showed me bank statements proving Marla Kensington had been quietly paying herself $4,000 a month in consulting fees, pushing inflated contracts to relatives, and using $28,000 of HOA funds to pay for the bulldozer that killed my bridge, all covered by falsified minutes. The district attorney shrugged and called it a civil matter. So I took Mark Ellison and a binder of copies to Chloe Ramirez, an investigative reporter who loves paper trails. Her first article exposed Commissioner Blake Harrow's cozy relationship with Silver Ridge Estates and those suspiciously fast-tracked permits. The second laid out Marla Kensington's self-dealing. Within a week, there were cameras at the county building, an ethics investigation into Commissioner Blake Harrow, recall petitions boiling inside Silver Ridge Estates, and an emergency HOA meeting where residents finally voted Marla Kensington out of the presidency and suspended her membership. Logan Pierce called that night and said, "You won." Sitting on my porch, listening to Willowbend Creek, I knew better. I wouldn't feel like I'd won until the bridge was rebuilt and the truth was said out loud, in a room where nobody could pretend they hadn't heard it. 2 weeks later, the Maple Grove Township Hall was standing room only for a public mediation. Neighbors packed folding chairs, 3 news cameras lined the back wall, and the supervisors sat up front like a reluctant jury. I sat beside Daniel Cortez. Across from us, Marla Kensington looked smaller than she ever had, with a young lawyer instead of a fan club. When they called my name, I kept it simple. I showed a photo of the bridge before demolition, then a still of the bulldozer mid-bite with Marla Kensington and 2 board members in the background, phones out. I played a clip from my security cameras of 2 men cutting trees across Copper Run Road at 2:30 in the morning. A truck later traced to her son's credit card and said I hadn't pushed criminal charges yet because I wasn't chasing revenge, I was chasing justice. Then I explained the expired permit from the State Department of Environmental Quality, the complaint, the pattern of code citations that started only after I refused their PR donation, the ethics investigation into Commissioner Blake Harrow, and the embezzlement Mark Ellison had uncovered. I told the room that, legally, I could close Copper Run Road to everyone and terminate the utility easement that Silver Ridge Estates had been using across my land. 85 homes would lose their emergency back route and their legal access for sewer and power lines. You could feel the panic when that sank in. Then I told them what I was actually going to do. I said I wasn't going to punish kids and retirees for what their board had done. that Henry Hank, Ward hadn't raised me to weaponize roads or toilets. What I wanted was straightforward. The HOA would pay documented damages and rebuild the bridge using a qualified contractor. We'd sign a 20-year utility easement at fair market value with guaranteed emergency access, and they'd publish a written apology naming both me and Henry Hank, Ward in the Riverside Chronicle for 2 consecutive weeks, and post it at the Silver Ridge Estates entrance where everyone driving in would see it. If they refused, I said calmly, Copper Run Road would close to non-emergency traffic on Monday, and utilities would lose their legal easement in 30 days. After a recess full of whispered arguments, the interim HOA president, Brian Keller, stood up, voice shaking, and said the board accepted every term, and that what had happened to my bridge, and to me afterward, was wrong. When the supervisor asked Marla Kensington if she wanted to speak, she muttered that she'd acted in the community's best interest, which is what bullies always say when the crowd finally stops clapping. She walked out past neighbors who wouldn't meet her eyes. The settlement was signed within days. The apology ran twice in the Riverside Chronicle, and for a while someone taped it to the stone entrance of Silver Ridge Estates. A stonemason named Caleb Foster, recommended by the Historical Society, rebuilt Henry Hank, Ward's bridge with stone pulled from Willowbend Creek and oak cut from my land. Old design upgraded to modern safety codes. On a July Saturday, more than 60 people came to help set stones. Farmers, retirees, Silver Ridge Estates families who wanted to help fix what their board had broken, and we ate potluck on the grass while kids painted rocks to line the path. In September, with my daughter and grandkids watching, Judge Walter Briggs gave a short speech about legacy, and my granddaughter ran laughing across the new span, creek water singing below. I used part of the settlement to start the Hank Ward Trade Scholarship for local kids going into engineering or the trades, the first award going to Mark Ellison's daughter, who wants to be a surveyor because she watched her father stand up when it counted. Silver Ridge Estates elected a transparent board, the county tightened its permit tracking, and Copper Run Road got an official historical marker. Marla Kensington sold at a loss and moved to another state. Most mornings now I drink my coffee on the porch, run my hand along the cool stones of that rebuilt bridge, and feel like the past and future both have something solid to stand on. And that leaves me with a question for you. When someone with a title and a crowd behind them tears down what your family built and calls it progress, how far should you go to fight back? And where's the line between standing up for what's right and turning into the very kind of bully you set out to stop?